Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide to your daily journey through the past to empower the future. Today is Thursday, June 19, 2025. As we do every Thursday, we're exploring a fascinating cultural practice that has profoundly influenced human civilization. Today, we turn our attention to African storytelling traditions, one of humanity's oldest and most influential forms of cultural expression. For thousands of years, the diverse cultures of Africa have maintained rich oral traditions that preserve history, transmit wisdom, entertain communities, and shape identity across generations. What makes African storytelling particularly remarkable is how these traditions have survived colonization, slavery, and modernization while continuing to influence global literature, music, and cultural practices. From ancient griots in West Africa to contemporary African writers winning Nobel Prizes, these storytelling traditions demonstrate the enduring power of narrative to preserve and transform culture. So let's explore the rich world of African storytelling, examining its historical roots, diverse forms across the continent, its crucial role in preserving knowledge and identity, and its profound influence on world culture. African storytelling traditions are as diverse as the continent itself, with over 3,000 distinct ethnic groups each contributing unique narrative styles, themes, and purposes. However, certain common elements unite these traditions across geographical and cultural boundaries. The most fundamental aspect of African storytelling is its oral nature. In societies where literacy was limited or non-existent, oral tradition served as the primary means of transmitting knowledge, history, and cultural values. Stories were not merely entertainment but vital repositories of community memory and wisdom. The role of the storyteller, known by various names across different cultures, griot in West Africa, praise singer in Southern Africa, or simply elder in many communities, was highly respected and often hereditary. These individuals were not just entertainers but historians, genealogists, musicians, and keepers of cultural knowledge. In West African cultures, particularly among the Mandinka, Wolof, and Fulani peoples, griots occupied a special social position. They memorized extensive family histories, royal genealogies, and epic tales spanning centuries. The training of a griot began in childhood and involved learning not only stories but also music, as most African storytelling traditions incorporate song, rhythm, and musical instruments. The most famous of the West African epics is the Sundiata Epic, which tells the story of Sundiata Keita, founder of the Mali Empire in the 13th century. This epic, preserved and transmitted by griots for over 800 years, contains historical information about medieval West African politics, society, and culture while also providing moral lessons about leadership, courage, and community responsibility. East African traditions include the extensive oral literature of the Maasai, whose stories often center on their relationship with cattle and the natural environment. Ethiopian traditions preserve the stories of ancient kingdoms and the complex history of one of Africa's few nations never fully colonized by Europeans. In southern Africa, the praise poetry traditions of the Zulu, Xhosa, and Sotho peoples create elaborate verbal portraits celebrating leaders, warriors, and important events. These praise poems, or Izabongo, use complex linguistic techniques including alliteration, metaphor, and rhythm to create powerful emotional effects. Central African traditions include the rich storytelling cultures of the Congo Basin, where forest peoples have maintained traditions connecting human communities to the natural world through stories of spirits, animals, and the ancestors who guide community life. Common themes across African storytelling traditions include the importance of wisdom over strength, the consequences of greed and selfishness, the power of cleverness and wit, and the essential role of community cooperation. Animal characters frequently serve as protagonists, with the clever hare, wise tortoise, and cunning spider appearing in various forms across the continent. The spider figure, known as Kwaku Anansi in West African traditions, is particularly significant. Anansi stories often feature the spider as a trickster figure who uses wit to overcome more powerful opponents. These tales served multiple purposes. They entertained audiences, taught problem-solving skills, and provided subtle ways to critique authority and social injustice. African storytelling traditionally occurred in communal settings, often around evening fires or during special ceremonies. The performance aspect was crucial. Storytellers used voice modulation, gestures, facial expressions, and audience participation to bring stories to life. Many stories included call and response elements where audiences participated through singing, clapping, or verbal responses. The educational function of these stories cannot be overstated. In societies where formal schooling was limited, stories served as textbooks teaching everything from practical skills to moral values. Children learned about their history, their place in the community, appropriate behavior, and the consequences of various actions through carefully crafted narratives. Stories also served important social functions, providing safe spaces to discuss sensitive topics, critique leaders, or address community problems. The indirect nature of storytelling allowed communities to explore difficult subjects without direct confrontation, maintaining social harmony while still addressing important issues. The arrival of European colonizers in the 19th and 20th centuries posed significant challenges to African storytelling traditions. Colonial authorities often dismissed oral traditions as primitive or unscientific, promoting European literary forms and written languages over indigenous practices. Missionary activities also impacted storytelling traditions, as many traditional stories were seen as promoting pagan beliefs incompatible with Christianity. Some stories were banned or discouraged, while others were adapted to incorporate Christian themes and messages. However, African storytelling traditions proved remarkably resilient. Many communities continued practicing their traditions despite colonial pressure, often adapting stories to new circumstances while maintaining core cultural elements. The diaspora created by the Atlantic slave trade carried African storytelling traditions to the Americas, where they blended with other cultural influences to create new narrative forms. The Brer Rabbit stories of the American South clearly derive from West African Anansi traditions, while Caribbean and South American cultures maintain recognizable African storytelling elements. In the United States, the preservation and documentation of African American folktales by collectors like Joel Chandler Harris, though problematically presented, and later, more respectfully, by scholars like Zora Neale Hurston, helped maintain connections to African narrative traditions. The 20th century brought new challenges and opportunities for African storytelling. The independence movements across Africa in the 1960s led to renewed interest in indigenous cultures and traditions. Many new African nations sought to reclaim and celebrate their storytelling heritage as part of building national identity. Modern African literature has drawn heavily on traditional storytelling techniques and themes. Authors like Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o incorporated elements of oral tradition into written literature, creating works that bridge traditional and modern forms of expression. Achebe's Things Fall Apart, often considered the most important African novel, draws extensively on Igbo storytelling traditions, incorporating proverbs, folktales, and oral narrative techniques into its structure. The novel's success demonstrated how African narrative traditions could be adapted to reach global audiences while maintaining cultural authenticity. Contemporary African writers continue this tradition. Authors like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Amos Tutuola, and Gabriel Okara have created works that celebrate and preserve storytelling traditions while addressing modern themes and reaching international audiences. The influence of African storytelling extends far beyond literature. Music genres including blues, jazz, spirituals, and hip-hop all show clear influences from African oral traditions, particularly in their use of call and response patterns, improvisation, and storytelling lyrics. Modern media has provided new platforms for African storytelling. Radio programs, television shows, and digital platforms now broadcast traditional stories to wider audiences, helping preserve and revitalize these traditions for new generations. Film has become another important medium for African storytelling. Directors like Usman Sembine, Suleiman Cisse, and more recently, directors from Nollywood in Nigeria, have created cinematic works that draw on traditional narrative techniques while addressing contemporary issues. The educational value of African storytelling traditions has gained renewed recognition. Many schools across Africa and in diaspora communities now incorporate traditional stories into curricula, recognizing their effectiveness in teaching language, values, and cultural knowledge. International recognition of African storytelling's importance has grown significantly. UNESCO has designated several African oral traditions as masterpieces of oral and intangible heritage of humanity, acknowledging their global cultural significance. Modern African storytelling faces both challenges and opportunities. Urbanization, globalization, and the influence of digital media threaten traditional practices, as young people are often more familiar with international entertainment than their own cultural traditions. However, there are also encouraging developments. Digital technology provides new ways to record, preserve, and share traditional stories. Online platforms allow storytellers to reach global audiences, while educational programs work to ensure young people learn their cultural heritage. The global recognition of African storytelling's influence continues to grow. The danger of a single story concept, popularized by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, draws directly on African narrative wisdom about the complexity and diversity of human experience. African storytelling traditions offer several important lessons for our contemporary world. They demonstrate the power of oral communication to preserve knowledge and build community bonds. They show how stories can address serious topics while remaining engaging and accessible. Perhaps most importantly, these traditions remind us that every culture has valuable wisdom to contribute to humanity's collective knowledge. The sophisticated narrative techniques, moral insights, and cultural knowledge preserved in African storytelling deserve recognition and respect as important contributions to world culture. As we face modern challenges including cultural homogenization, the loss of local knowledge, and the need for sustainable community practices, African storytelling traditions offer valuable models for maintaining cultural diversity while adapting to changing circumstances. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of African storytelling traditions. Tomorrow, we'll be back with our Economic Milestones episode where we'll be examining the creation of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund and their role in shaping the post-war global economy. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell. What aspects of African storytelling traditions do you find most interesting or relevant? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, I'm your guide for History Explained, where we believe that understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.